Welcome to Something to Marvel About, a podcast where we discuss and dissect the week's MCU releases. My name's English Dave. I'm here with my co-hosts Raven and Rocket Mike. What's up, peeps?
What up,
Yo,
Dave?
what's up?
This is a podcast where
Full
we created
title sequence.
right. Oh, talk about
Really
title
epic
sequence.
music.
Can I just say, just hearing the title sequence, the fanfare for
Thank you.
Marvel.
It is so nice hearing the title sequence again. It's been so long since I've heard the Marvel opening title. Like, it has been long, but it hasn't at the same time because I
was like,
went on a Marvel binge like 2 weeks ago.
Oh, did you feel that?
Yeah, feels good.
I really thought they only reserved it for the movies, and I was like, I did not expect that.
You just stand up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, let's go!
Oh my! I remember
Oh,
years.
so
I remember
good.
years ago because this is not how it started, right? It was a shorter. It used to be,
Oh yeah, it was. Yeah.
and then it was like, it was like just the end part, which ends with dun 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 dun, and then they made the long version with the sweeping
Mhm.
intro and the pictures and stuff. And I remember when that first came out, people were like, "Oh, it's so long. Let's get to the movie." Blah blah blah. Now I'm like, no,
Nah,
rewind
I
it.
want
I want to
all.
see it twice.
I want
before the
every
movie starts.
moment.
I want to look at every
Savor
frame.
every second of it.
Right.
Yeah, I want to pause it. I want to rewind it.
It now fits into all of the intro songs that we know from Paramount and Universal and MGM. You know, we could all sing them the same way as we do with Marvel, and now
Yes.
it's just kind of like, this is our newest one. Like, this is
Boy,
ours now.
Sylvester, get
Oh,
it.
I was, and I remember when MCV was still in its infancy, there was many articles or video essays stating, "Oh, MCU doesn't have a familiar theme song like Star Wars, Indiana Jones, etc." And my counter argument was always, "But there's not enough time. Not enough time has passed. You're comparing to like 30-year-old
For real.
franchises. You know, like let it sink in first."
Were they talking about the music when the movie first came out? No.
Exactly. Like, let it sink in. Let us watch it 1,000 times. Like, let that happen. Let it wash over us. And then, like, this past year,
This is tough.
Yeah.
it was tough.
I finally got to a point where, like, a couple of weeks ago, where it was like, oh, I really have nothing to watch, and I'm tired of it. Like, you know, I was just like fiending for a big
Yeah.
release.
They're like,
Even if it's
what
a
can I
shit
watch
movie.
again now?
Right.
Even if
right.
it's a horrible movie, I just want a big release, like big summer release, something that's super hyped up that I like waited a while for. Even if I gotta watch it at home, it's just
Right.
like I felt like there hadn't been a movie that had just even been hyped about in
Which,
so long, or show. Just
side note, I think this is why we had so much rage against Wonder Woman 1984. It's because we had been waiting for so long for something like this to come out. Like, even something small as that, you know, to
Yeah.
us, it was like, fuck it, I'll take another Wonder Woman movie. I don't care.
yeah,
Like,
yeah.
and then it comes out, I'm like, why you gotta fuck with me?
But yeah, it was great.
Heartstrings.
It was great to hear
Yeah.
the fanfare. I thought it just felt good. And Mikey touched on it. We are used to only seeing this in theaters, and then seeing this on TV kind of cements that no, this is part of the MCU. As much as we'd like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. and all those shows to be part of it, they only kind of loosely part of it. They didn't really have those intros. And like I've said before, the movies would influence the shows, but the shows never influenced the movies. This is telling us right from the get-go, it's literally all connected this time. Don't worry, guys. It's the same people. And so I was ready. Up for episode 1, the synopsis is as follows. Wanda and Vision struggle to conceal their powers during dinner with Vision's boss and his wife. And if you guys want to know our thoughts and expectations going into this show, check out our previous podcast, our first podcast.
James Fudd.
We talk about our expectations for this show and every show and movie coming out this year under the MCU banner. So I'm going to start with you, Mike. I'm just going to ask you, what were your quick, brief thoughts on this episode 1 specifically?
I knew something was going to be kind of like a Leave It to Beaver kind of theme. I Love Lucy, I Dream of Jeannie kind of, you know. But once it started getting started, you know, it had more specifically kind of like the Munsters kind of vibe, or what was it, the Bewitched. You know, it's kind of like they are a unique family, fish out of water, and they're trying to hide who they really are in this, you know, very, cookie cutter society that the 1950s was kind of framing how American families should be. Looking back, it was like, this is some fucking like North Korea propaganda shit, but
100%.
now it's kind of like, oh no, that was the norm, and this is how it should have been. And they're just going along with it, trying to fit in. After that, I just kind of like let it take its course, like, what do you got? I only had so much expectations, but it exceeded my expectations so like tenfold. I'm like, it took like, you just got to accept what's happening, try not to think about it too hard and just let it take you.
It's funny because after watching the episode, I watched both episodes twice back to back. So I watched 1-2, then 1-2. And on my second viewing, I tweeted, stop watching WandaVision, waiting for the ball to drop, and just watch it for what it is. And you'll realize a lot is happening than you realize. Like, it's like one of the things, like, you're looking left for something and everything's happening on the right. And you're like, it's one of those situations. And because I think a lot of people didn't believe with Marvel when they said, no, we're going in. And also, we're not holding your hands anymore. It's been 22 movies or 23, I forget, whatever. Like, this show is like, blah.
You should know them by now.
It's like, I was reading this article that said, go to a comic book store, pick up any Marvel comic, try and tell me you've realized what's going on in the first issue. You won't. Because it's like you're just thrown right in there and you kind of just figuring out what is going on. And also, you can tell they're committing to this as a series. So we're going to give you stuff when we give you stuff. And watching it from that point of view, the second time around, made me start noticing all the watching it as a sitcom of its era, and really, really realizing that they really play on these tropes really well. And I think that's why I started to enjoy it more. Raven, what were your thoughts on the first episode?
I really enjoyed it, like the first episode. I think, like you guys are saying, I think it took me about midway through to kind of realize, like, oh, okay, this is what's going on here. So in the beginning, I was kind of like, this is going to be tough to get through. And then about midway through, it was like, okay, and I started accepting it for what it was. I used to watch a lot of the older shows like Bewitched and I Love Lucy and like The Honeymooners and certain
Dick Van
shows like that.
Dyke.
Leave It to Beaver, Dick Van Dyke. Because when we were younger, it was like dating myself, but at one point it's like cartoons were only on at a certain time. So if you didn't go to sleep by 9-10, which I certainly didn't, you were up watching these kinds of shows. And,
the Nick at Night. Yeah,
Nick at Night, exactly. So I was up watching these types of shows, and although I didn't fully understand them then, I think a part of me did enjoy them. And this kind of reminded me of watching Bewitched, because even though it was an older show, it was nuanced at the time. And I feel like some of the themes kind of, stood up still now. And in watching this show, it's almost as if Bewitched was made in 2020, It's like our super updated version. And I like the ideas of, them having this secret to hide, but trying to fit into, rural, 50s, type neighborhood. But at the same time, everybody's got scandals. And, so I do love that side of it. And I think overall, I was more entertained than I thought I would be. But it took a little bit. But once I accepted it as like, this is kind of a trope of all tropes within the Marvel universe, it's like, oh, okay, I got you.
It's funny because you say entertained. I ended up being entertained in a different way than I expected to be. And
I ended up feeling entertained almost as if I was watching a 50s sitcom.
Like, yes, in that sense, when you accept that.
Audience. Yeah, like I felt like the audience probably felt back then.
Yeah, it didn't feel like parody.
Right. It felt like new jokes written in 1950.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like this was all brand new to us, which it is. But it also was, the style felt old, but the jokes were new. It's so weird how they do that. And it's kind of like, damn, this is what it felt like to see a brand new show back then in the, with that frame exact,
But even little touches, like even with the visual effects, it was still old school effects when Wanda's moving everything. They didn't apply new effects. It's like old techniques with wire and stuff like that. And I just, again, the line of dialogue, and even, we'll touch on this later, just even like gender roles and expectations. In that era in the 60s, it was like, ha ha ha. And now you're like, oh, wait, whoa. you become kind of aware of it, but it's clearly been written for people to make you aware of it, right? And those little subtle touches, and then even again upon second viewing, the many layers of people's lines of dialogue, even though it's written like 1950s speech, it still means a lot to modern day MCU in a double kind of meaning, which I thought was really well done.
Dropping bombs,
right?
It's like,
like, wait, rewind. Did they just say it?
I think that was the point. The thing that was kind of annoying me, though, almost like in the first half, was like, just spit it out. Like as a show, like visually spit it out. Like,
what's happening?
Color, I want it all. I want all the effects from my time now.
And they're like, you're gonna wait.
Patience. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But again, I think part of that, right, is
this week on.
And it'll go further, is like sinking you into this world that either Wanda created or someone forced Wanda created, or whatever that they're inhabiting, right, is to sink it further to kind of make it real. But I think one of the things that makes this show work from the get-go for me, like literally a few minutes in, was the chemistry between Paul Bettany and Elizabeth Olsen. We've seen touches of this in the movies. It worked better for me
in the show, because that was one of my biggest complaints about the films, was I felt like their relationship felt forced for me. Like it went from like subtle hints where I thought it was almost like a family friendship thing to like, whoa, in Infinity Wars, she's all this. I was like, ugh.
I think it's that comic book movie trope of, well, it happens in the comics, so it happens in the movie. And it works in various degrees.
They just assume that like, exactly. Oh, well, this is how it ends up. So it's like, no.
They end up together. So, and I completely agree with you. I think I agree with you, and I think they kind of redeemed themselves in this. Like, yes, it was fine. We kind of you're aware of it, and you kind of let it slide. It wasn't too much of an issue, but you kind of made note of it. But I think this time you're kind of like, I like this. I think it's a lot to do with the fact that both actors, especially Paul Bettany, because again, he's not so like stoic and bland. He gets to like express himself. So between the two of them, and then I think she nails the era aesthetic perfectly. I think she should do period movies.
She did nail it.
I think
like
together
she should have been in The Help and like
right
movies like it.
But even
especially
the way she
seeing
talks.
her, I was gonna say the way she talks, her losing her Sokovian accent and her going into like a now neutral American was like, oh, okay. So obviously this is now you speaking, the actor. But something that I didn't recognize before is like she had been phasing out of her Sokovian accent throughout the later MCU movies, which is something that I hadn't really kind of touched into until listening to her now having no accent whatsoever. Like, it did work up to it actually.
And it's funny because I was reading an article with her recently, and she said that people always comment on her accent thing, and she says there's actually a narrative purpose for it. Because Sokovia isn't a real place, they spend a lot of time with dialect coach and finding the accent that worked for her American accent. And what's the actor that plays her brother? Pietro?
Yeah.
Quicksilver.
Yeah, Pietro. Quicksilver.
That's his legal name.
And Aaron Taylor-Johnson's British accent, finding that kind of middle ground that worked for both of them. And she said, if you remember the narrative, the first few films, after she leaves Sokovia, she's in training and in hiding, and Black Widow's training her to have more of an American accent. And so that the accent is lost over time. And that's also really the reason why Black Widow's accent goes over time, because these are people who are trying to blend in America. That's the point. But she always says she puts a note to kind of throw in a little bit of the accent in there. And I think that's really interesting when people kind of think on that level. They get thinking layers beyond what you'd expect. We've already talked about the opening of the show, and the main plot of this first episode is the two of them kind of realizing there's a date on the calendar. They can't figure out what it's for, but they assume it's for a special date night type thing. But you realize later it is for a dinner with Mr. Hart, Viz's boss. I'll never get over Viz. I'm sorry, but
it just makes me cringe every time. Like anything else, call him anything else. I call him Zion or some shit.
Zion.
Big Red,
or just call him V. I'll take V over Viz.
Yeah, call him anything else, and please anything else.
But we get a moment of Vision, at his job where he works as at a computational company, but he doesn't know what he does. And this is one of the first teasers of Vision being a character who starts to kind of question or ask questions about what's going on and things like that. And with hindsight, looking at moments like that, you realize that Vision's probably going to be the one that kind of starts pulling the thread even more, is curiosity. At this point, we don't know what Vision is because he died the last time we saw him. I'm pretty sure this is actually Vision, so I think the better question is, how is he back? Not is he real? But I think we'll find out more about this as we go on.
Could he have been snapped back?
No, he wouldn't, because the snap, he wasn't killed by the snap.
Before the snap, right?
Yeah. That's why Widow doesn't come back. Only people who would die. Sorry, Raven. Every
Pretty
time
sure it was covered in Endgame, but I'm sorry. Pause. This is what it's all about. It's not accepting reality. This is Wanda's way of coping. I'm going to dig into this later. But
right. Layers.
Raven is exactly what she's going through, so it's relevant.
Even this podcast.
Because I want to create an alternate reality where Black Widow is back. Like, I just can't accept it. I won't. I skip that part of the movie every time. As far as I'm concerned,
no, it didn't happen.
He's just at home or injured when the final fight with Thanos happens.
So in your mind, the upcoming Black Widow movie is happening in the future, not the past.
Yeah, for sure.
Got it. Back at home, we're introduced to Wanda's neighbor, Agnes, which kind of plays again the one of the tropes of sitcoms.
I love Catherine Hahn. Like,
well, I was gonna ask you, Raven. That was a question I was gonna ask you.
Of like female comedic actresses, she's probably like maybe my favorite of this era right now.
I love her energy.
You know, I just think she's so funny in everything she's in. I love her energy. And like something about her facial expressions, like just her delivery on things is so good. I feel like most of her roles, if you replace her character, I can't see it being the same, just because whether the movie is good or not, she's kind of my favorite part. You know, she's great.
One of the things she touches on, it's, you know, a lot of people are kind of touching on different things about Agnes. Maybe she could be a villain of the series. We'll go into that later. She seems to be very pushy about children. With Wanda and having babies and things like that. In this moment, she's telling her, use your seduction techniques, when Wanda thinks that they're getting ready for a date night, you know. And I find that very, very intriguing, especially on the idea that this also touches on gender roles. You know, look pretty for your man. When she said pretend to slip so he can catch you. You know, it really made me think of that's how people looked at gender roles all the time, right? Men had to chase women, but women had to do things to have the men chase them, and that's what's expected of you. Raven, what do you think of just kind of the show also touching on these kind of issues as well?
I like the show's approach because I feel like, you know, you could very easily portray these tropes in a way that just feels like that's still how you feel, you know? Because like if done the wrong way, then it's like the creators, this is what they think of women, you know? So I like that it's done in a well-balanced way where the women are kind of the strongest characters and the men kind of just do what they're told in a lot of ways. But, you know, they have to keep up the facade of the man works. With Vision and Wanda, I feel like there's, you know, for the most part, Wanda has it together, and she's the one that kind of actually has like her head on straight, and Vision's kind of all over the place, you know. So even though they're in these roles of he's the head of the house and he works and she cooks and everything, she's still kind of the more powerful of the two, or still kind of calls the shots.
We cut to one of two commercials that we see, just random commercials, and this one is for Stark Industries toaster. This does a few things. One, it reminds us that the universe is a greater Marvel universe, and you know, this would be Howard Stark at this point creating different technology. But also, we see a red dot of color. This is the first time we see color in this episode, and again, in hindsight, this is slow reveals of maybe something is happening, something is coming through. I don't know. But also, Stark has an interesting connection to Wanda. In Age of Ultron, we're told that Stark missiles are what killed her parents. And an unexploded Stark missile almost killed her. Stuck. Exactly. So there's connections to Stark in that sense. And when the Hearts arrive at the house, Vision does his best to cover up the misunderstanding. And I love the little touch of the Sokovian. He's like, this is
Also, the
Sokovian tradition.
misunderstanding was funny too. Just like how the whole thing happened, like the heart on the calendar.
Yes,
it's
yes.
an abbreviation. It's like, why would you
Mr.
abbreviate?
Right. In that one, it's very
It's
hard.
so true though. Like, why would you need to abbreviate anything? You're both like super geniuses and you're putting heart emojis.
And it's heart without the E, so it's even shorter. So you can just like
Yeah, exactly. So you really didn't need to abbreviate anything. It's like you're trying so hard to be human that you don't make sense.
But that, again, that's another trope, right? The miscommunication trope in these sitcoms. Like, oh, I thought, and you thought, oh, we're silly. You know, so how they played that off. And I loved how she was in a sexy gown in the 50s. I was just like, that's not even.
That's nothing. Yeah.
Like, that's
Your grandmother wears that, you know.
That's like a nice dress. It's like
what?
you're going to a gala.
She was like, it's like, you're not revealing anything.
All right. Let me cover up my
We're
cover
like,
up.
seen it.
Right? Her Avengers costume is more revealing.
She's wearing a fucking corset the entire time. Damn.
Right? Shit, basically.
But
I
I
saw
love that.
more when she was, blowing shit up in Africa. Like,
and Ravi touched on it, right? Like the trope of there's a secret, someone with secret powers, or there's an alien or whatever. You have to hide it. That plays more in episode 2, but I wanted to touch on the idea that I like that Vision has to constantly change his face from his Vision face to his human face or his Paul Bettany face.
Paul Bettany looks weird in black and white.
Right, he does.
He's a strange looking guy in black and white. I don't think it's his colors. The grayscale isn't working.
Right.
It's only made for our time.
Again,
yeah.
We get. Right, he's only made.
I don't know if he'd be a heartthrob in the 50s. I don't know if ladies would be like, oh, Paul Bettany. I'm not sure.
Maybe it's just too much
he'd be a
prosthetics.
villain.
Yeah.
Right.
He's a good villain though. For the
He is a good villain. He was great in Solo as the villain. I liked him. He just needed to do more.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Scary.
He looks like he has more of a villainous face for
Right.
black and white.
Yeah, like I mentioned, when he did the cover up with, that's a Sokovian type greeting. That's a first clue or first reminder that she is Sokovian. She's not American, even though in this show it's like she's American because she's portraying that accent. Wanda does her best to make dinner after a little mistake. And then Mr. Hart starts to kind of push and like, what's going on here? What do you do? What do you do? Asking all these questions. And did you guys catch the little Easter egg with the wine bottle that had Maison de Mépris? Maison de Mépris. Maison means house. House of Mépris. House of M. And there's even a big M on the bottle as well. Again, the show's doing a lot of little things like that. Again, it's just like
They gotta be doing it.
any kind of illusion. There's little kind of Easter eggs and secrets that kind of reveal the illusion if you know where to look. Mr. Hart continues to press his questions. He starts to choke, and you get this really weird, creepy moment. Raven, I love this moment though, with Mrs. Hart just like, ha ha, stop it. What was she saying exactly? Was it stop it or?
Yeah, just to say
stop
it.
Stop
Yeah.
doing it.
Yeah,
Stop
stop
doing
it.
Stop
Which
it.
I also was thinking to myself, not a very good form of CPR. You just keep saying stop it and hope they figure it out. I was like, wow, they really didn't have a better technique in the 50s. Stop it.
Right.
Stop. There is no, what did Bossing say? That's what it reminds me of. Judy.
Oh, Judy.
And,
Yes. For you
Judy.
Last Airbender fans, that did remind me of that. And Raven actually hit a good point. I'm going to get into that in a bit later, but you hit a good point right there. Mike, but I want to ask you a question first. Firstly, how great was it to see Deborah Jo Rupp in this show? I was like, 70
Kitty's
show,
back.
Mom!
I know.
I was gonna say I love her so much.
She's appropriate for, it's in our sense, it's actually a period piece. 70s is a period, and she played that where I watched that 70s show from beginning to end as it was happening. She was definitely one of my favorite characters, and to see her again in this, I'm like, perfect. Oh my God, that cast was amazing.
As soon as she
And
walked
she
in the door, I
doesn't
was like,
disappoint me.
yes.
Kitty's here again. Yes.
Right.
So well done. And she, it's like on it from beginning to end. As soon as she enters, I'm like, exactly what we wanted to see.
I feel like she made the episode for me.
For sure. Yeah.
She was
The
perfect.
highlight.
But did you notice that it seems that Wanda made Mr. Hart choke? And then on top of that, because, you know, as he's asking the questions and pressing the questions, she looks at him and kind of blinks and he starts to choke. And then on top of that, when Mrs. Hart is saying, stop it, she then turns and looks at Wanda and says, stop it. And then Wanda tells Vision, save him, and then Vision does it. So that begs the question.
I feel like Wanda's in control of things.
Or
that's
some
what
level. What does that say?
Is that she, at least the environment is affected by her.
Yes.
You know, at bare minimum, she has some type of effect on the world around her.
I didn't catch the fact that she turned and looked at Wanda and said, stop it, and started repeating that. Because that would make sense going in, you know, jumping ahead a little bit into an episode, in the second episode, when someone asked Wanda, like, who are you? And she looks terrified. And it seems like everyone is kind of afraid of Wanda without really knowing why. And this is the first scene. And I didn't check that. Wow.
Yeah, it almost reminds me of like the Truman Show, you know, in the Truman Show where it's a constant operation to keep this man, you know, not knowing, where it's like, all right, send in the extras, send in the neighbors, send in this person, you know, anything to like distract from, you know, the main. And he didn't have superpowers, you know, so I love kind of the, what do you call it? The ode to kind of the Truman Show in that moment.
Yeah, keeping the secret.
But I do feel like certain characters within this illusion do know what's going on.
Yeah,
like
that's
you know,
true.
Like part the character of was it Mary Jo Rupp? What's her character's name? The woman.
Oh, Mrs. Hart.
The wife, Mrs. Hart. Yeah, I feel like Mrs. Hart definitely, and like Agnes seem to know something. But
Agnes definitely knows something.
Yeah, but I don't think like Monica Rambeau knows anything.
I think again, there's an episode, Raven, you're a fan of Twilight Zone. I forget the name of this episode of Twilight Zone where this kid is this powerful kid and all the grown-ups have to make the kid happy unless the kid's going to punish them with his powers. And I think there's some element of that where, unlike Truman Show, where it's like, yes, they're keeping this facade, I think there's a level of fear.
Like, yeah, for sure.
Like, you know, like if we don't do it, we're scared of her. You know, we're scared of what she's going to do to us, or on some level. And again, we'll go into this in the second episode more. But the end of this episode ends with us kind of also, again, pulling back behind the curtain, right? Pull out of camera. It ends like a TV show ending, but we see a mysterious figure watching this show. And where the show has been using the 4:3 aspect ratio, this switches to 16:9 in this moment. And
I love that. It's so subtle.
Right? So subtle.
It's something that you don't notice. I only noticed in going back and watching it again that the aspect ratio is off. But you instantly feel like I'm watching a 1950s sitcom. You just accept it and move on. It's not something that you analyze. Like, I really didn't pay attention to the bars on the TV at all.
No.
And
but that's a good thing.
You're
immersed in it.
Huh. Yeah. But I love that. It's such a small thing, but it's the little things that make it important when you are doing time or error jumps, you know.
I agree. In this moment, though, many of you won't notice if you're not crazy avid comic book fans. On the notepad, the guy has a logo with a circle and a sword, and sword is a group in the Marvel comics who are kind of like in conjunction or under the same umbrella as Shield, right? So you have Shield, you have sword. And in the comics, Sword first appeared in the comics in 2004 in Astonishing X-Men, a comic written by Joss Whedon. And in the comics, it stands for, because it's an abbreviation, it stands for Sentient World Observation and Response Department. And they would operate on an orbital space station known as the Peak, and they would monitor the cosmos to do their best to neutralize extraterrestrial threats. So whereas SHIELD would deal with things that are on Earth, Sword would stop things from getting to Earth in the first place. Right, but from certain toy leaks and things like that, we found out that in the MCU, it doesn't mean sentient world observation and response. It means sentient weapon observation and response. So this makes me start thinking: is this connected to the Sokovia Accords? Because sentient weapon, human weapons.
See, that's the thing. That's also why I feel like, although she's in some type of trance, I feel like it's like a 50-50. I feel like she's in control of certain aspects of her world.
And that's the end of our analysis of the first episode of WandaVision. Tune in and listen to our second episode, which should be up right now. Give us your thoughts on the first episode. Find us on social media at The Nerdy Bunch. Thanks guys for listening, and as always, keep it nerdy. Peace.